export it. All right. So take a look at my screen share, please. Constructors have no return type, and they have the same name as the class. And constructors set the initial state of all the variables. And they're invoked when other code uses the new keyword. So for example, here's a class that I have. It's just like a subset of something I've shown you before. It's a book class. It's got two variables, and here's a constructor. It says public book, where when we call it with an author and a title, then it sets the author and the title variable to what it says. So here's an example. When some other code somewhere else says book equals new book, and then an author and a title, then this code right here, this constructor code, gets executed. So we've been using these things for months, with the frog class or any custom class that I had you guys work with. We were using a constructor. So the variables passed in as parameters only exist inside the constructor. In this case, it's the A and the T variables. After the constructor finishes executing, they don't exist anymore. So when we call that new book line, there's a temporary variable A and a temporary variable T, and that's why we're storing them right here. Author equals A, title equals T, because these private string variables up top, the private variables up top, those are the ones that exist as long as this object exists. The ones that are in the new call, those are just temporarily available to Java, and that's why we store them in the private variables. So you might wonder, why don't we say string author and string title? I always recommend that you use a different variable name here in the constructor, and I'll show you why, because on the next screen, this is what you have to do if you have them named exactly the same. So here's a potential constructor where I say string and then author, just the same name as the variable up top, and string title. What happens is if you do this, Java can't tell which one that you mean unless you put the word this in front of the variable. So you might see something like this down the line. It's not, I think you can, it'll probably show up in some of the problems we do, on the College Board website. I don't generally make things that require that you use this command in this way. I just think it's a lot easier just to say string A and string T, and then that way the one that says author is the big picture one, is the one for the object. There'll be another time when we use this, and it's more common. But for variables, it's just easier if in your parameter list you don't have it be the same name, the exact same text name. But I put down here in this text, it says, it's like saying, quote, the author variable at the top level of this object, when you say this dot author, as opposed to the author variable here in this constructor or here in this method. Anyway, you'll see this used from time to time. You're not going to do it today or anything. So if you create a class and you don't write a constructor, Java provides an invisible no argument constructor that sets all the variables in your object to default values. So integers get set to 0, doubles are set to 0.0, strings are set to this thing called null, which is just an empty string. So take a look at this class that I wrote, the battery class. So we've got private double charge level, private string brand, and then here's a toString method, but there's no constructor. So what I'm saying is if you somewhere else say battery B equals new battery, great, it creates this battery object, but the brand will be the word null and charge level will be 0 because there's no constructor to set up the values like we want it. So here's battery again. And if we ran this code that I just said, battery B equals new battery, and then we printed it, it would print out brand : null, percentage charge 0.0. The point of this, you don't have to worry about this battery thing, but the point of it is, if you make a constructor, if you don't write a constructor, Java is going to set all the values to their defaults. So, and the default for numbers is 0, and the default for a string is null, the word null, which means nothing's there. Questions? All right, so then moving along, you can overload constructors. That's not a bad thing. That just means multiple constructors can exist. They all have the same name, right? Because constructors have exactly the same name as the class. But each one has to have a different signature, and the signature is the type and order of the parameters. So this is this. I made a pretend person class with a string that just one constructor takes just the name, another one takes the name and their age as an integer, and the third one takes their name, their age, and their eye color. So this was all legit here. 3 different constructors. And Java can tell them apart, because when you say new so-and-so person, so-and-so equals new person, and then in parentheses, you're going to put different parameters there. And then Java looks at what you put there and then finds the right constructor to use. So you'll see there'll be assignments where I say, please make 2 constructors, one that takes this and one that takes that. Usually when you have fewer parameters, you're just having Java set you're just having your code set the defaults on all the other parameters to something logical. Here's a question for you guys. I gave you over on the right here in the box 3 possible 4th constructor headers. So only one of these would be allowable. So I'm asking you to don't say out loud, don't say on the chat, but look over on the right and consider those 3. I'm saying, hey, we're going to write a 4th constructor. Which of these 3, 1, 2, or 3, would be allowable? In a second, I'm going to ask you to hold up your fingers, a 1, a 2, or a 3. But don't do it yet. So the signature of a constructor, or any method really, is determined by the type and the order of the parameters. So 2 of these on the right in the box would not be allowed. One of them could be allowed. All right, everybody, hold up fingers. 1, 2, or 3 fingers. Fun. It's 3. I say why. Only 3 is allowable because its signature, which is an int, a string, and a string, is not already in use on the left. So order matters. So look at number 1, string color. Now, you might think, well, there's no string color over here, but there is one that just has a string. And that's what we're talking about. The name of the variable doesn't matter. So you couldn't do public person string color because there's already a constructor that just accepts a string. And the name of the string doesn't matter, because once you get into the code here in the constructor, the name, like this code over here on the left, doesn't know that the variable was called color over here. It just knows it's got string n, and it's going to put it in the name variable. Same with this one, where we accept a string and an int. I know that seems different than this one, where you accept a string and an int, but Java considers those the same because it doesn't care about the name of the variable. It's saying, hey, I've got a constructor that accepts a string and an integer. But this one, even though it's the same information as we have here, it's totally allowable because it's an int and then a string and a string. And over here, what we had was a string and an int and a string. And so the order is different. So it would be allowed as another constructor. I mean, why would you do that, right? But you're going to see problems where they're like, which one of these, which ones would be allowed as another constructor or another method? And I just wanted you to see an example. So a lot of you had different fingers up. None of you gave me the middle finger. I appreciate that. But, or maybe you did. I couldn't tell. You're really tiny pictures. So, hey, this was your chance to flip me off. I never would have known. Don't do it now though, because I think I'd know. Oh, got a feeling. Anyway, so now I want to talk briefly about toStrings because toStrings are something we're going to see a lot in our custom classes. So this isn't constructors anymore. This is just something a little different. But most custom classes have a toString method, and it always starts with these words: public string toString. That's just the rule because that's saying it's a public method. Anyone can call it, and then it's going to return a string, and it's called toString. And what it does, it's going to have at least one return statement, and it's going to return some text. Because then somewhere else, someone's calling, someone's trying to print this object, and the toString method returns this piece of text that the other people print. So this was what the toString looked like in the battery class. It just has return, the brand of the battery, and the percentage charge. I think I have, yeah, so right here, somewhere else, somebody calls battery B equals new battery, and then they print out the battery, and Java prints the battery info. Now, if you didn't write a toString method for a custom class, so for example, if we didn't have that toString I just showed you on the previous slide, and we tried to print this battery, we would get the word battery and then at, and then these numbers. And that's actually the memory location of where that object is on the computer. I mean, it's completely useless information for us. But you'll know now, like if you ever see frog at such and such, battery at such and such, or today we just wrote that student class. If you didn't have a toString in there and you tried to print the student, it would say student at with this weird memory address. That should just tell you, oh, I forgot to write the toString. Sometimes people write the toString, but they misspell it. So it's supposed to be small t-o and then capital S. So sometimes people write it with a small s, and then Java will print, will say battery at with the memory address because it needs to be capital S. I mean, it's literally looking for that thing. If it can't find it, it prints the generic thing. By the way, toStrings can have, they don't have to just be one line. So sometimes they have logic in them. In this case, I want to, for the battery, I wanted to add this message that says low charge if the battery charge was under 70%. So I made a string temp and made it empty. And then I just did this if statement. If charge level is less than 70, then I put low charge into temp. And then I always return just what I was returning before, but I throw temp on at the end. So this is one way to do it. I have another way to do it here where you just have an if and an else. So, hey, if the charge is low, then we just return this thing that says low charge. Otherwise, we return the thing. Oh, this shouldn't have temp on the end. I'll fix that. But I'm just telling you, you can do all kinds of stuff in a toString method. Sometimes you're required to have like an if statement and do different things. You only have once you return out of a toString though, you're done. You can't return and then keep doing things. Like as soon as you have the return line, the toString's done. It doesn't. There's no more. There's no more questions. I'm we're almost done here. Right here. I just wanted to fix this because it bothered me that it was wrong. Okay, yeah, we're done. So now we're gonna